Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar, How to Incorporate Security into Your Company Culture. This event, brought to you by Security Magazine, is sponsored by AlertMedia. And now I'm excited to turn it over to today's presenters. Katie, go.
Yes, thank you so much, Taylor. And hello, everyone. I'm Katie Goen, Director of Communications at AlertMedia, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining our discussion on incorporating security into your company culture. It's going to be a great conversation today, so I want to dive right in with some introductions. First, we have our featured guest today, Wendy Bashnan. Wendy has worked in government security at the U.S. Department of State, NATO, the Diplomatic Security Service, and also in the private sector as Chief Security Officer for Nielsen. And currently, she's the Director of Security and Fire Protection at Scout Motors. So she knows a thing or two about security, and we are lucky to have her here. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Katie. Thanks so much for inviting me to talk today. I'm really excited about the topic.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here. And up next, we have Sarah Prattley. Sarah is Senior Vice President of Global Intelligence at AlertMedia, where she leads a team of experienced analysts who are responsible for monitoring and alerting on emerging threats and incidents worldwide. Prior to AlertMedia, Sarah was the Vice President of National News for CNN. Hi, Sarah. Great to have you here today.
Hi, Katie. Great to be here with you and with Wendy.
Wonderful. Well, I want to go ahead and review our agenda really quickly before we get started. First, we're going to talk about the true cost of physical security incidents. And I think once you see some of this data, you'll agree that it's pretty eye-opening. We'll talk about incorporating security into your company culture. And finally, we'll talk about how technology can help you up-level security. So before we get into all of that, I would love to go ahead and launch our first poll for the day. We will have a few polls throughout the presentation, so we'd love your participation. It just really helps us gain some context on who you all are and why you're here and what you're hoping to learn. So the first question we're asking is, do you currently consider security an integral part of your company's safety culture or culture in general? You can say yes, you could say no, or you could say maybe you're unsure at this time. So I will give that just another few seconds. We have some more answers coming in. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and share those results so that we can all take a peek. All right, great. So we have 83% of our folks saying yes, 11% saying no, and 4% just are unsure right now. So let me get your thoughts there, Wendy. Is that, about what you were expecting?
I'm pleased to know that kind of people feel that way. I'm curious, the 4% unsure, I'm sure there's a context behind it for people's companies or what they're doing at the time. But yeah, it's nice to know that people are feeling that confident.
Great. And Sarah, anything to add there?
I would just say for the percentage of folks who believe that it's not, there's probably some rationale and some reasoning there. Hopefully we can either convince you otherwise or help to support some different ways that you can create that as a part of your culture.
Excellent. All right. Well, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you first so you can go through some of your data. I know this is your favorite thing. So we can talk about the true cost of physical security.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So generally speaking, organizations are facing a rising number of threats that can pull safety leaders, security leaders, business continuity leaders, really in many different directions when it comes to prioritizing risk. So here's just a few that are top of mind. According to a recent study from the Gun Violence Archive, over the past 3 to 5 years, we've experienced nearly 2 active shooter events on average every day in the United States. And though gun violence has trended down since the height of the pandemic, the number of incidents is still quite high, and nearly 50%, actually 49% of active shooter events occurred at or surrounding private businesses. So really forcing organizations to maintain a state of perpetual awareness. Second, cybersecurity incidents. They also are on the rise. Ransomware payments in 2023 surpassed the $1 billion mark. That's the highest number ever observed. So organizations are obviously exposed to more cyber risks than ever. And unfortunately, as we look at the data related to cyber events, none of the numbers are trending down. As we look at specific industries and sectors that are really targeted by these sorts of events, the healthcare sector in particular is consistently the biggest victim of U.S. ransomware attacks. And as noted here, misinformation, disinformation, those things are also key contributing factors when we think about a lot of the cybersecurity risks we're up against today. This third one is likely not shocking to any of us, but worth noting that extreme weather and natural disasters are also on the rise. 2023, hottest year on record. Also the single most active year in recorded history based on the volume of billion-dollar disasters here in the United States. We have a great team of meteorologists that I work really closely with every day. As you can imagine, we're really busy with Hurricane Helene right now. As I'm talking to them all the time, they continue to mention this increase in global severe weather and natural disaster events. And then as we think about all the geopolitical uncertainty that we're seeing around the globe, organizations are really feeling the impacts worldwide of these global conflicts. Supply chain has been a really big focus as we think about what's happening in the Middle East in particular. Demonstration activity, another huge outcome we've seen and been experiencing at really heightened levels as well in this kind of area. So our global intelligence team, we pay particular attention to demonstration activity. We alert our customers in advance of planned events for such protests. That team sent out over 9,000 activism and civil unrest alerts just in 2023. That was a 43% increase on the year prior. I note this stat because I think it's really important to really demonstrate the number of events and how rapidly they're increasing. When we think about that significant increase, some of that was attributed to events post October 7th, but a lot of those are also attributed to things like labor activism, women's rights, climate activism as well. And these are areas that we're expecting to continue to see an uptick, especially as we also are drawing closer to the general election here in the United States. All right, so what does all of that mean? Simply put, it means more spend. So more physical security incidents mean more spend for the security function. We can look at some data here from the State of Physical Security entering 2024 report. And in there, we have a few different stats that we're noting, as you can tell. And as Katie mentioned, I really love data. So 25% of businesses reported increased physical security incidents over the past year. So a really decent uptick there. And then 87% of companies expressed fear that the number of physical security incidents will continue to increase or remain at current levels. So kind of that static or increased level. 75% of businesses have elevated security to a higher business priority over the past year, resulting in an average increase of just over 15% in expenditure on security related areas last year as compared to the year before. And then lastly, one final stat, about a third of businesses reported that criminal activities, have led to project delays over the past 12 months. So these statistics really show, I believe, that it's pretty difficult for security leaders to really efficiently protect their people and their assets from the rise in these incidents without significantly increasing some sort of spend, whether it's on human beings, whether it is on more technology and resources, or probably likely a combination of the two. All right, so according to the World Security Report, companies lost over $1 trillion due to physical security incidents in 2022, so not too long ago. And then additionally, 1 in 4 publicly traded companies also saw a decline in value after facing some sort of physical security threat, right? So it's a moment in time, it's a physical security threat, but unfortunately those things can trend out over time. And these increased losses and dropping values can of course result in severe financial impacts across these companies. Okay, I don't want to overwhelm with too much data here, but I obviously am very passionate about it. I truly think the data can drive so much of the things that we're doing from a preparation and preparedness standpoint. So I've got one more slide here, if you'll humor me. First, in the retail sector, 81% of retail stores have reported that organized retail crime offenders are becoming more violent and more aggressive with their tactics. I'm sure we've seen some of this play out in the news media, some of the robberies and burglaries that we've seen at some retail locations, some things that have trended in the past. In sports in particular, 65% of venue directors feel fan behavior has worsened and become more violent. Their top concerns are things like fights between patrons, violence against staff, as well as the potential use of weapons. And I think things like this extend to venues, large venues where we actually have a lot of events that we all probably attend. Healthcare, on average, 58% of US-based nurses report having experienced some sort of physical violence while they were on the job. And then additionally, 2 out of 3 emergency room physicians reported having at some point been attacked. And then about a quarter of those have experienced assaults, not only this one time, but multiple times a week. So that's an incredibly disturbing statistics about kind of the violence in that sector going up. And then lastly, transportation, major assaults on transit workers have actually jumped as well by more than 65% over the past 2 years. And the rising severity of security events, across various industries, I think it really underscores a critical need for enhanced protective measures. Obviously, addressing these issues can be incredibly essential when we think about mitigating risk and ensuring the safety of our employees as well. All right, before I hand it over to Wendy, I'm going to give you a quick real world example to mull over. So let's go ahead and remember back to 2020 when we saw widespread police protests after the police killing of George Floyd that happened in Minneapolis. As many of you will remember, one of AlertMedia's customers in the retail space actually experienced significant financial losses during this time. The company was forced to temporarily close some locations, also limit hours at others because of safety and security concerns. Some of their stores actually were burned. Some were vandalized, burglarized, looted. So huge physical security damage and property damage, as well as damage, of course, to merchandise that was in these stores. And this company wasn't only impacted in the Minneapolis area where the event occurred. There were protests around the country, as we all remember, including in places like Chicago and LA and Seattle, and many other locations saw similar impacts. Of course, insurance policies cover a lot of the recovery costs, but the retailers still suffered revenue hits and other financial disruptions here as well. I know this event was a few years back, but I mention it because the riot damage across the US was most expensive, or the most expensive in insurance history. It cost more than $1 billion associated with this event. And this eclipsed the records that were set in LA in 1992 during the Rodney King related protests and riots. I mentioned earlier, we were seeing this pretty significant increase in protest activity. So with the rise and with some of them turning tense or violent, it's a small fraction, but it happens. Obviously, this type of physical security concern should obviously be top of mind for all of us, especially as we see this uptick in events. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Wendy for the good stuff on how to really incorporate security into your company culture. Wendy, take it away.
Thank you so much, and very excited to talk about this. You definitely gave us a lot of information to kind of unpack and incorporate. And I think, to me, what it's telling us is there's a tremendous value that security brings to the business, right? Or to your company or to your association. And I think one of the things we're trying to do as an industry is, how do we put security into the DNA of your company, right? Or your organization. And look, I know, just like mine, many companies still look at security and the security function as a cost center. I think the challenge that we all have is, how do we move the needle away from that? And how do we show value that we bring to the business? And then thus to all of the staff that are in that organization, right? Let's go to the next slide. So I think one of the first ways we start is with engagement. It's not just about the business understanding what security does, but for me, the critical juncture is security professionals engaging with the business, with the business units, and fully understanding the business units' OKRs, their KPIs, so that we support the business's goals. One of the things that I think we also have to learn is how do we seize the opportunity when they come up? Because we can't always control everything, right? And how do we connect with the business? Understanding that sometimes it's going to be very informal. It can't be a data dump. We can't all of a sudden, because your boss or the CEO walked up to you and said, hey, how's it going, that you start vomiting out all the security problems that are happening in the company, right? You need to be able to have in your back pocket immediately your pitch, right? It's the 2 or 3 critical things that you want them to remember, and you want to leave them with wanting to come back to you for more information. And look, we all know leaders are busy. We're busy, right? So it's about actively listening. So having those questions in the back of your mind of what you want to ask them, and then listening to those answers, because you're going to take that information back, and then you're going to show later on the value that your team or that security does to then bring value to the business. One of the things that I like to think about is, like, what are their challenges? We have to ask the questions about their biggest challenge for one business unit may be different than a different business unit. And like, what are the roadblocks they're having? Here's the one that I love the most. What is the process that slows them down the most? Because look, in organizations, we love processes, right? But it's about finding out what is important to them, because then this is how we're going to change our narrative later on. And I think we want to get them to understand that our objective is to help them do their business goals securely, right? Safely. By learning, and I mean really digging in deep to the details of the business, you actually learn to figure out what the company does. Like, why does it do it? What is the product that we're making? How do we make it? And then from that, we also want to know, well, if that's what we're doing today, how did we get here? And where do we want to be 5 and 10 years from now? Once I try to get all that information, and trust me, this is just Wendy 101. All right. I want to build that trust, that relationship. And I understand that it's a commitment that I'm going to take months and sometimes years to build that, because I want them to know that my intention, my goal is to secure the company, secure the brand, secure our products, to secure our customers, and then let them understand and trust that I have their back, right? And I'm not a hindrance, right? We don't want to be the roadblocks. Let's go, we'll talk about the next one. So connecting with other departments, like this is all part of the engagement. It's all part of communicating with stakeholders, and it can be all kinds of stakeholders. I always tell everybody, we got to get out of our silos. One of the things that I stress to my team, and I would encourage others to do, is we have to stop thinking like we're the only ones that do security. It's not the security department's own, we don't own the sole responsibility of security within an organization. And we have to get out of the mindset that we do it alone. We want to stress that security is everyone's not only responsibility, but it's their opportunity, right? We got to share information. And again, when we talk about communicating, I'm going to share something about what the military does. They have this thing, they call it BLUF, BLUF. And it's about bottom line, the most important thing you have up front. So BLUF. It's about storytelling. It's about getting the critical points up front to your audience. And that's whether you're talking to the CEO or you're talking to a group of managers on an assembly line, right? By sharing your experiences, you're creating a narrative of a best practice. And one of the things that I liked, because we were just talking about Hurricane Helene that's coming, right? This is an opportunity where you get to go back and bring together different business units to work on one issue. And it becomes that best practice. And I'm going to give you an example. So a few years ago, South Florida was also hit with a previous hurricane, Hurricane Ian. And the company that I was with at the time had a, let's say, multifunctional crisis preparedness team, right? And it made up all the stakeholders of the business that participated. And when the hurricane was approaching, as we were preparing for it, and then as it hit and we were kind of responding to the aftermath, I was surprised by the amount of senior leaders in the company who, after they participated in this sharing of this experience, they kept commenting over and over again, well, I had no idea that so-and-so did this. I had no idea that so-and-so did that. And it's like, okay, well, how do we maximize now this learning potential, right, of sharing experiences and creating, this is our culture, right? Not just the sales team's culture or the HR team's culture. One of the benefits of having like these cross-functional things is it creates diversity of input, and you get a holistic picture of the situation. Again, sticking to this Hurricane Ian, one of the things that we had in the aftermath, of course, we're trying to account for people. We're trying to see how we can help. And we had a very eager manager in the business unit of the sales team who was all gung-ho and ready to support his team members that didn't have electricity and wanted to go out and buy generators. And of course, his team had the money. But at the same time, HR had to chime in and say, hey, wait a second, let's think about this holistically. We have a lot of people across all different teams that are in similar situations without power, and they don't have the capacity to buy everybody a generator. And by sitting down and talking about it, we were able to come up to a resolution that worked for everybody, right? And we were able to comply with some regulations as well, right? So it's that bringing together of, here's our common situation that we're all working on. On the next one, let's talk about partnering, right? And specifically partnering with IT. Most staff that I run across can't tell you the difference between physical security and cybersecurity. It's all security to them, and it should be all security to them. I tell people we have to break down our own silo. We have to understand that we are all part of one team that's trying to protect both the assets, the people, the company, the brand, all of it. And the easiest way to do is to partner with your IT team, to partner with your cybersecurity team, leverage what they're doing to help share the message that, maybe on the physical security side, I have. Recently, at my current company, I had an opportunity to partner with my cybersecurity CISO colleague, and we were going to participate in an all-hands meeting. And we went into the meeting with the intention of explaining, one, security is everybody's responsibility. And two, we work together. So security is just security. It doesn't matter whether it's cyber, it's physical, it's human, it's all security to us, right? And we explained to them, look, this is what we're trying to accomplish. These are our goals. This is how it's going to help you, at least the way we think it is. And to engage and have a dialogue within other stakeholders within the business to understand, oh, they're not here to bother me or to prevent me from doing what I need to do. They're here to help me. Going back to silos, though, I want to say this. Shifting. We have to align within our own security teams. Oftentimes, it's easy for people, especially in this virtual world, right, to be able to just stay in virtual meetings 6 and 7 hours a day and not engage with people and not utilize opportunities when they come up when you're in person to really get to understand what other people are going through. And I loved in person, walking the halls, kind of like knocking on people's doors, just all of a sudden, let's have a casual chat. It's very hard to do in the virtual world, but it's not impossible. And one of the lessons learned I'm just going to share with everybody is I go into meetings early and I try to get on and get the early birds and, find out how was their weekend. What is the big project that they're working on? And, where do they feel like they're staying on cue or are they slipping? And most importantly, here's the kicker. I always ask, how can I help them? Right. So it's not the same thing as walking the hall, but it's close, right? And it's engagement, and it's how do we get them talking to us and how do we talk to them? I want to pivot and I want to cover on something that I hadn't brought up yet. And that's security can't be the no people, right? It's easy to say, well, security says you can't do this and security says you can't do that. We can't do that anymore. We have to be the enablers for the business. We have to show the business this is how we will bring value to you, because this is how we change the culture within your company. I'm going to give you an example of a situation that happened a few years ago at another company that I was with. We found out, the cybersecurity team found out that there was an entire business unit that was not following a compliance regulation that had been put in place. And everybody was in an uproar. They wanted to fire everybody on the team, and they really wanted to fire the manager. And I was like, this is really suspicious that everybody's not following it. I said, does anyone ask why they're doing what it is that they're doing? Shockingly, no one had. So I kind of reached out across the globe to the manager and said, hey, we know now that you're not doing this, and I'm just curious why. This person immediately went into an explanation that was completely logical. The process that had been created to meet a regulation actually prevented them from being able to do the job that they had been tasked to do. And so they didn't want to fall behind and they didn't want to fail. So they circumvented the process. And I was like, okay, let's get some more people into this conversation. Let's figure out what the regulation is that we're trying to accomplish. Let's figure out what the team is trying to do. And then let's, based on that, come up with a resolution, which is exactly what we did. So nobody got fired. We were complying with the regulation. And oh, by the way, the business unit was much happier because we weren't we weren't considered the people that were holding them back from meeting their goals and objectives. Seems simple, but you probably could list off 100 of examples like this that happen every week in certain companies all over the globe. Let's go to this next one. How do we get people to engage with us? Like I've been telling you, you have to engage with them, right? You want to change culture, you got to be active and you got to communicate. One of the things is you got to show them how to engage with you. Easiest way I've seen, and there's a lot of science behind this, you've got to explain why it matters to them. Why does security matter to them? Maybe their whole team is just about meeting a sales quota, but why does security matter to them and enable them to meet that sales quota? I like to use this example, and I didn't really think about it till I came to work for a car company, but have you ever wondered why on television you never see advertisements for truly luxurious automobiles? I'm not talking about Mercedes. I'm not talking about BMWs. I'm talking like the luxurious ones, the Bentleys, the Lamborghinis. Do you want to know why? Because most of the people that watch television will never be able to own one of those vehicles. So why would it matter to them? Back to that engagement on employees, right? And how do they participate in security? I often tell everybody, I don't need a large security team. I don't want a large security team because for me, every single employee, contractor, visitor that comes to one of my facilities or one of my events is part of the security team. And it's my job to explain to them their role, their responsibility, and empower them to be able to respond. I want them to be the eyes and ears of the company. I want them to know and recognize what's wrong when it's wrong and to be confident and to have trust to come tell us, right? Later on, I'm going to give you an example and a story about this. But just think about how you and your day-to-day operations and in working with other business partners and etc. How do you help them participate in security? Because again, we got to get out of our silos. Security is not just our role; it's their role too, right? Okay, let's pivot again. I'm all about pivoting oftentimes. Partnerships, right? The necessity of partnerships is more than just about networking. Networking, tremendous, has huge value to the company and to your programs. But it's also about benchmarking. It's about best practices. It's about sharing tools that are being used, these kind of things, and how to do impact analysis for your business, right? Or who has a great case management software tool that can be used. Wouldn't it be easier to be able to reach out within an organization or an association, a partnership, and be able to say, hey, I need to do this. Who's already gone through a lot of the due diligence and the background checks, to tell me what really works for them and why? Like, it's a force multiplier in my mind. Here's where the governmental partnerships really kick in. Because let's face it, the government is always, and I don't care which government it is, government is always going to have more resources, more time to do a lot of that research, right? And it's not just on a tool. It's also in that intelligence sharing that we were talking about earlier, right? They have more assets in front of them that they can look, and they can look at it in a more holistic approach, and they can pull together the trends faster than, let's say, the corporate world. Why not partner with them? Why not find out what is the trend that they're seeing, right? What is the cause behind the trend or a potential cause? Maybe there's multiple causes. But then based on that, how do you turn that information into a value added to your company? So again, I can't stress the value of being able to join and participate in As Is International or OSAC or DSAC or whatever the organizations that are out there within certain industries, right? So where does this all come in? I think it comes into this next slide. And it's about how do we hone our communication skills, right? How do we make things matter? And how do we meet the target of our audience? And look, I'm often asked, hey, I'm new to a business or I'm new to a company, what class or what course should I take or what would help me? Obviously, it happens with a lot of younger, more junior people that are just getting into an industry. But I always tell them, I said, look, if I were to start all over again, I would absolutely sign up for communications courses, marketing courses, like learn how to improve my language capabilities, right? My communication capabilities. And with that, then you get that comfort level, right? And this is where you can start speaking freely and your genuine self. And it's not easy, right? You got to practice. There's tons of practice that has to happen. The other thing is if you're only going to have a certain amount of time with an audience, whether it's your CEO or maybe it's a business unit that's invited you to come speak to their staff meeting or something like that, then you want to get the most out of that time. So it's about knowing what you want to share, right? And it's about listening. Sometimes communication, I would say 90% of the time, communication is about listening. It's about asking an open-ended question and then listening to the comments. And if they start going down a certain path, ask another open-ended question, right? So that at the end, you feel you understand what they're trying to accomplish so that you can help them, so that you can enable them. I'm gonna add a little context to this. So I read a lot of the Harvard Business Review, and I love to see the articles on communication skills and sales pitches. And I was reading one. It was called the three pitfalls when giving a sales presentation. Now, look, I'm not a salesperson, so I'm like, I need to read this, right? I probably hit these pitfalls all the time. One of the things, as I already mentioned, you have to practice. You can't just wing everything. And look, I'm a chatterbox, shocking to all of you, as I can tell. I can't wing it. If I wing it, I go down tangents and I forget to talk about things, and I'm not optimizing this one-on-one connection that I'm having with people. So I have to practice. I have to think about intentionally what it is that I want to share. How am I going to share it? What are the questions that I'm going to ask as follow-ups, right? Because what I want to do is learn. It's all about learning. It's about learning what other people are thinking. Maybe some of that's empathy, maybe some of it's curiosity, whatever the motivation. It's about finding out how we bring value, right? Here's another element, and we're going to go to this last section, and I think we're at the one where you wanted to talk about a story. Is that correct, Katie?
Yeah, actually, though, you've given us so many real world scenarios so far. So if it's okay with you, I'll probably just skip to this next poll and then we will talk about the technology.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our next poll now. If you guys could please get your answers in. This time we're asking, which internal team could you collaborate with more to improve the perception of the security function? So Wendy mentioned a few of these. Maybe it's your leadership team overall. Maybe it's that IT department specifically. Maybe it's aligning with your own security team. Or maybe it's another department that we didn't discuss, but you feel like there could be more collaboration. So I'm going to give that a couple more seconds. And then like last time, I will go ahead and share these results. Here we go. Well, probably no huge surprise here. 91% are saying leadership, which makes a lot of sense. But I do want to point out that all the answers are represented here. So there are at least a few folks who are looking to collaborate more cross-functionally. So Wendy, what are your thoughts there?
Well, clearly leadership, management, whatever the senior executive levels of your company are important. Unless you're actually sitting at the table with them on a regular basis, I would question, how are you going to engage them if you're not at the table? I'm not at the table, right? I have a boss that sits at the table. So I need to leverage partnerships and relationships that I have with other parts of the business so that when they're at the table, they're not just talking about what's important to them. Oh, by the way, they're also, I'm hoping, talking about what's important for the security of the company. I'm not trying to make a whole bunch of paranoid people. I'm just trying to get them to understand what we're trying to do and how we help the company.
Sarah, we have quite a few folks saying you should have had all of the above as an answer. What are your thoughts on that? Anything to add?
I completely agree, because I think we would have had 100% of people saying that all of these are areas that they want to and need to partner more intimately. I think leadership, not surprisingly, comes above and beyond all. I think for a few reasons, because it can be incredibly challenging for a lot of the reasons that Wendy shared, but also because it is a lot of the control over financials and budgeting and resources. And again, I think Wendy has shared a lot of great examples and important things when it comes to not only partnering across organizations, but really kind of that executive buy-in and creating the right partnerships to then influence that, which is great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you both. I'm going to turn it back over to Wendy now so we can talk about some technology.
Yeah, let's just face it. Technology is everywhere, right? Some of it works most of the time. Some of it sometimes doesn't. If for those that were on the East Coast, the Southeast Coast earlier this week, you lost your internet, you lost your cellular at the same time because, oh, guess what? A repair company cut the fiber optic line and it affected Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. What did we do before technology? Here's the thing about technology. We have to be able, especially in the more emerging technologies that are out there, we need to be intentional early in the development of technology on how to use it responsibly, how to use it ethically and morally, right? That's how we will get the truest value that technology can bring to us. It's not always about convenience, right? Cell phones, virtual meetings, yeah, those are all convenient and they help us optimize resources. But how do we use responsibly, right? I'll stop there, and hopefully somebody else has some other comments to add just about the benefits to these type of technologies that are out there.
Yeah, I think it's about just expanding your security capabilities without headcount, right? Like you were saying earlier, like everyone is security. And I would say, moving from that reactive perspective to the proactive perspective, so that you can just better peek around the corner, if you will, and sort of forecast some of these threats or events that might be coming down the pike. So those are my thoughts. Anything to add, Sarah?
Yeah, I think it definitely knowledge is power. And I think it is that true combination, right? Having the right people on your team, no matter the size of your team. Wendy, you mentioned earlier, you're happy with a small team because you feel like security expands beyond your team to partners and different people within the organization. And then I think coupling that with the right technology to empower the people on your team, but also just to empower your company writ large. I know a lot of organizations that kind of collectively share information about things that are happening, maybe threat incidents or emergencies that are happening around the business, to really kind of create and foster that culture of safety and security too.
Yeah, Sarah, I think one of the technologies that everybody talks about is AI, right? So, and it's emerging, it's developing, it's evolving. And I think for me, now is the time. We may even be a little bit behind the curve on this one. It provides a business intelligence, right? That's what you're doing, Sarah. Your entire team is business intelligence. It's not security intelligence. What you're doing is showing people quicker, more diverse, accurate information to make business decisions, right? Whether it's a weather event or a cyber event, right? And we need to figure out how we want to responsibly use AI going forward. We can't say we're not going to use it because that's not realistic. We need to figure out how to use it. I'm just going to keep saying it responsibly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think AI it's so important. It's hard to avoid conversations around it. I think it's really important to discuss kind of writ large, not only among safety and security teams, but really across organizations. I mentioned earlier, I lead a team of intelligence analysts, experts. They're really tasked with providing our customers around the globe with situational awareness of events, that business intelligence, as Wendy mentioned, events that could impact business continuity, things that could impact employee safety. Unfortunately, oftentimes things that impact both. As you can imagine, a few of the things that are really key to doing this are finding these events quickly, ensuring that information is real and accurate, not misinformation or disinformation, helping our customers to really understand how these events are relative and relevant to their business and their people. So to do all those things, our team does leverage artificial intelligence by way of a tool that we built in-house. We have a great product and dev team that have helped us to build this and continue to build and support it. As you can imagine, with the vast quantities of information our team is sifting through on a daily basis, it really helps us to be able to leverage that kind of technology to quiet the noise, to get the right information, to hone in on the things that are the most important for us. The way that we think about it is that combined effort. We think about leveraging artificial intelligence because it is incredibly powerful and incredibly important now and as much in the future as we can see, but also coupling that with the humans, right? With the expertise of a team of intelligence analysts or whoever you're coupling with it. The way that we talk about it is human in the loop, right? We've got a great technology, and then we've of course got great human experts that we're leveraging on top of that as well. And as Katie just changed
Sarah,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think this is often missed when we talk about technology. A lot of people look at technology as it's going to replace the human, and science isn't showing that. The human still needs to be engaged in that loop exactly the way you were talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, as I think about the way that my team uses it, that human analysis and expertise is really key. Some of the AI can do amazing things with helping us find information, to suss out different things, sometimes even synthesize mass quantities of data. But it is really the humans that layer on that expertise, the analysis, that we can't necessarily, number one, rely on the technology for, but also just that level of expertise and commitment. As I look at the slide now, there's a lot of things that it helps us do. And these are like, it's speed, right? It helps us to find information really quickly, but it's the humans that help us to kind of layer on that relevance, that accuracy, and add that context to the business and to the security team and to the organization really as a whole.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing that. I do want to get to some audience questions because we have quite a few coming in, so get ready for that. But first, I want to go ahead and launch our last poll before I get to some additional resources. So you guys are going to want to stick around for that. At this time, we would just like to know if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how AlertMedia can help you up-level your physical security program. We have Sarah's amazing team that she was just describing. We have wonderful partners like Wendy who provide great thought leadership expertise. So just let us know if you'd like to learn a little bit more. You can say yes, and we will certainly get you more information. You can also say no, not right now, and no hard feelings. You know where to find us if you have questions down the line. So I'm going to keep that one up for just another moment. And then, all right, here comes some questions, everyone. Okay, Wendy, I'm going to go to you first. We haven't mentioned supply chain much in this conversation, but we've clearly seen a fault in the supply chain that can grind some companies to a halt. How do you approach this issue? Hold on, I lost the last part of it. And how do you handle these folks when they're not necessarily under your control, your company control? Did you get that? You want me to read it again?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I get it. So okay. I'm going to take the second part first and then remind me what the first part was. But
okay.
I don't think about things in terms of control because we don't control anything. Even my CEO doesn't control it. He may think he does, right? But there's always another entity, whether it's our customers or our clients, that are also going to have control. So it's about how we leverage these opportunities that we have to influence control. Supply chain, it really was highlighted during COVID, but it's always been important. It's always been critical. I think businesses just en masse experienced the difficulties of it the most during the pandemic. But the way I see supply chain, the way I would tackle it, and this is for the person who was asking the question, is one, I need to know what are their supply chains, right? It's about understanding where they're getting their products from, why they get them from those locations. What are the risks? Because sometimes they're so tunnel visioned into what's just about getting the cheapest, saving the most amount of money that we can in order to then deliver whatever our service and our product is. In the end, though, what are the risks that we take when we choose to use a supply vendor that is, coming out of a highly prone hurricane zone, right? Or a tornado zone? Like, how will that affect our bottom line? Once we as a business, not just the security team, not just that business unit, but the finance team, the legal team, like once everybody else understands the impact of that area, then it's risk management, right? And that's what in my mind, supply chain is all about risk management. It's understanding where the risks are, what is the risk to our ability to deliver, right? Our service or our product. And then what can we live with? Or what are we comfortable in living with to be able to get to a delivery point? I think where we get caught up is that we don't allow enough time or we don't look at things holistically enough to see all the interconnectivity between the supply chain, right? And then again, this was highlighted in the pandemic.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. I'm going to stick with you here, Wendy. Sorry, Sarah, I'll get some coming your way in just a moment. We're getting quite a few folks, Wendy, saying similar things. So I'm going to condense it into one. People at my institution are not receptive to the "we are all responsible for security" thing. They say they're not comfortable. It's not their responsibility. How do we convince folks that they are a part of security?
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. It's an uphill battle. It's been an uphill battle at every organization that I've ever been a member of. I think back on when I reflect on ways to try to influence and to help. I had to reverse the question, and I had to first kind of like peel back that onion. I had to be able to explain why it mattered. It's not just about, oh yes, we must have a security program. Well, why? Why do we have to have a security program? Well, and then once you can come up with an answer that people are comfortable with, okay, now that we realize why we need a security program, okay, then why does it matter to them? If people understand the why, they will become comfortable. I believe this. I've seen it in action. And they have to trust you, but it's once they're empowered and they trust that you're really empowering them, you're not turning them into little police officers. You're just letting them understand that their role plays into this bigger, game, if you want to call it, of security, right? And of protecting the company or the organization. I don't know that
we
I
had a
answered
guest
because it's an ongoing thing, right? But
yeah,
I think you have to change the questions.
I was just going to add that we had a security leader once on the employee safety podcast here at AlertMedia, and they were saying one way that you can explain it to folks is not only say, hey, it's going to help you protect yourself, but you also say, and your coworkers, and when you sort of put someone else's, well-being into their mind, a thought process, then it becomes, oh, I'm not just protecting myself, I'm protecting this person that I've worked with for the past months or years or whatever it is. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. And in fact, you made me think about it. It's also a lot of the information that we share also helps them protect their family, right? Mm-hmm. Their home life,
absolutely,
their whatever that may be, right? And because it's not rocket science, and we have to be safe whether we're in our home, whether we're going to a sporting event, like Sarah was saying earlier, or whether we're at the office. So yeah, it's about protecting your coworkers, it's about protecting your family, and it's about protecting your organization.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, we're getting a lot of questions about your theory here on AI and the human component. So could you provide any examples, or maybe just one example, of how human vetted threat intelligence has made a difference in responding to security threats?
Sure. When I think about AI and when I think about the team and really the value of getting real, accurate, speedy information, right? It's important if we're working in the scope of emergencies that we're getting information that is real and accurate and actionable. I know with AI in general, my team sees vast quantities of information coming into our tools. One of the things that we're working through is identifying and really getting rid of disinformation and misinformation. But really one of the biggest things we see is just irrelevant information, stuff that doesn't matter. I think what can tend to happen for a lot of folks, if you're not necessarily honing in or using a human, is that you can get information that's generated from a bot. AI does a lot of amazing things to help us filter out the noise. AI can also be used to create misinformation and disinformation and also perpetuate it. So one of the things that we see as a good example is just being able to diffuse a lot of things that might not be actionable or might not be happening at this moment in time. Obviously, having that human in that human interaction can really help to dispel those things quickly too. I mean, a lot of the analysts that we're working with, and I think a lot of organizations too, who have different people in these roles, they understand how to source and how to vet and how to look at information quickly and kind of draw those parallels and make decisions upon it.
Thank you. That's excellent additional context. All right, we have time for one more question, and I'm going to pose this to both of you. Wendy, we can start with you. Give me just a quick answer. As you look ahead to 2025, we are really approaching Q4 very quickly. What do you think the biggest threat will be to corporate security next year? What's top of mind for you?
Oh, to me, it's a bit of a toss-up. Like, I think climate is going to be critical, and we don't control it. Let's just face it. But I think the geopolitical stuff is also going to be equally complicated. It's going to require a lot of that analysis that Sarah was talking about, and that human relevance that needs to come in to say, why does this matter to my company? Because it's not going to be intuitive for everybody, and you really have to be able to communicate that of why it matters to them.
Sarah, how about you?
I wish I had an all of the above button for this one. I think Wendy hit on a few important things, and I like not getting out of just selecting one, but I think climate is incredibly important for a few reasons. It impacts all of us. We are all impacted by severe weather and natural disasters. It doesn't matter what business you're in. It doesn't matter where your people are. We're all being impacted to some degree. And again, to Wendy's point, you can't control it. These are things that are really happening and happening fast in real time. I think geopolitics for a lot of us, when we think about the war between Russia and Ukraine, when we think about what's happening in the Middle East, we talk about these being long-standing issues. These things have been going on for decades, right? So even though we may see lulls or we may see agreements, right, these are things that can continue to flare up, and there are a lot of other geopolitical implications too. But I also think about just the demonstration activity that my team is tracking. We've seen a hugely significant increase, most of it causing business continuity disruptions, but we do see a fraction of these events that do become violent, that we do see vandalism. So I throw that one in there as well. And then the caveat I add is, even with the three that I just mentioned, they all impact every business so differently. Somebody might be sitting out there shaking their head like, you know what? My company is just based in this one sole place, geopolitical implications. So yeah, I want to pay attention. I understand my risk profile, and it's pretty low on my list. So I think it's really important is your organization is thinking about some of these top trends and some of these areas where we are seeing a significant increase or things that are on the threat horizon, to really internalize and think, okay, when I'm looking at these things, what's my risk profile? Is this something that I should prioritize and really be doubling down on with my security teams and partners? Or is this something that I can deprioritize because the likelihood of it having some sort of impact, direct or indirect, is pretty insignificant?
Fair enough. And then just a couple people are asking, why does climate change affect security, physical security? Anybody want to make that correlation?
I mean, I'll mention just from our end, especially as, I'm working with a team of meteorologists. We're supporting a number of our customers right now who see Hurricane Helene that's coming in, right? Physical security impacts from a storm, the impacts to a remote environment, right? I know all security teams act slightly differently, but when organizations are faced with things like this, it really does come down to a lot of security infrastructure that I think in business continuity infrastructure that can be really key and core, not only in helping to manage the situation, but in preparations, in managing the situation real time, and then also potential recovery efforts.
Very good. Well, I mentioned additional resources for our attendees, so let me put those up on the screen now. I highly recommend checking out the business case for human vetted intelligence. That's a deeper dive on what Sarah was talking about earlier. We also have a risk mitigation plan template that is just a fantastic resource. So those can both be downloaded for free at alertmedia.com. And it's not on the slide, but I wanted to plug that Wendy was in a fantastic episode of the Employee Safety Podcast a few months back. So that is also on the resources page and free. So please check that out and spread the word about it if you would. And then finally, I just want to thank Sarah and Wendy for being here today. You guys just offered so much great insight. Wendy, really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
It was my pleasure. I enjoy hearing the questions and concerns that people have, and then a lot of the solutions that are out there. We just, these are the great value elements that come about doing podcasts and webinars like this. And so I thank you for inviting me, but more importantly, I thank you for hosting these things, because it's important.
Absolutely. Sarah, it's always a pleasure working with you. I'm just going to let you nod your head and say thank you for so thanks for joining us. And speaking of this opportunity, I want to thank Security Magazine for being such a fantastic partner. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I do hope to see you at a future Alert Media webinar. Thank you for spending part of your day with us.